Welcome to a brand new episode of the Simple Flying Podcast, where we'll give you the lowdown on the latest news from the world of commercial aviation. Here's what we have for you this week.
Coming up today, Tom will look at a huge win for Embraer.
I'll have a look at the latest airline start flights to Amsterdam, while Channing looks at spider webs, but not in a literal sense.
Yeah, and finally, Tom will compare the Oneworld and Star Alliance lounges in Amsterdam.
So now you know what's in store, let's get on with the show. And I wanted to start by talking about a huge win for Embraer. SAS ordered or had placed an order for up to 55 Embraer E195-E2 aircraft. So that is 45 firm orders and then options or purchase rights for 10 more. These are going to be starting delivery in 2027, so not long to wait, and coming in a cadence of about one a month. And it was a big announcement and a lot of press were there, but it was a sort of really interesting announcement as well, because it was a full hour-long event where first Anko van der Werf, who's the CEO of SAS, the one who announced the news, and then sort of said why it was good for SAS, etc., etc. And then Arjan Meijer, who is the CEO of Embraer Commercial Aircraft, took the stage, and he gave a sort of a more of an overview about why the ERJ is a good fit for what SAS wants to do and the benefits of the ERJ. And then finally, the CEO of Copenhagen Airport also got up and sort of said why the ERJ is going to be good for connectivity in Copenhagen. After that, though, then there was a sort of a panel discussion with the three of them talking about, again, why the ERJ is a great plane, not the ERJ, I keep saying ERJ, it's not, why the E2, the E-Jet, is going to be a good fit for the region and the economy and the airline. And then there was a bit of a Q&A, and it's quite interesting because during the Q&A, I asked what this means for other small aircraft in the SAS fleet, because, you know, I flew on the CRJ 900, they have the E1 in their fleet, and they have a fleet of ATRs. And, you know, the ATRs and the CRJs, most of them are not even 10 years old yet. Now, Anko said that they have no plans to retire those yet. What the ERJ coming into the fleet actually means is that there's flexibility. So, you know, right now there is a place in the fleet for the ATR because it's a smaller aircraft. There is a place for the CRJ, but because the aircraft are on wet lease in the future, you know, they have the flexibility to say, actually, you know, we're fine with the E-Jet as a one-stop fits all, or we could keep operating these different subfleets. So I found that really interesting. You know, we're going to have a lot more content on the SAS ERJ. I keep saying ERJ. I don't know, CRJ and E-Jet.
I mean, Embraer they do have an ERJ series, but yeah.
But this is not that. We've got some more content coming out on the Embraer E-Jet order from SAS, so keep an eye out on simpleflying.com for that. But I will talk about why I ended up in Amsterdam in my next slot.
Oh, nice. Yeah, well, that's some exciting news, I think, and it's good in so many different ways because, like you mentioned, they already operate the E1 series. So
now you say that reminds me of one thing that I did want to say that I didn't get onto. You know, it's a really, really simple. If you're say you're flying the E1 already as a pilot, it's a really simple transition to be able to fly the E2 as well. You have to do a little course, but you don't even need to go in a simulator or anything. It's just learning the differences on paper, really. And then that makes you a dually qualified pilot. So you could fly the E2 one day and then the E1 the next. So, you know, that also helps with implementation strategies for the airline.
Right. Yeah. So it just seems like it's a win-win situation. And I personally think the E2 just looks so cool. I love the big engines on it. So I would hope that other airlines, you know, in the US perhaps find interest. I don't know, maybe Hawaiian Airlines as a potential replacement for their 717s. I don't know. But I think that this aircraft is really proving itself because we're seeing more airlines show interest in it. And it could be, you know, a really big competitor with the A220 perhaps too. So yeah, that's some great news there and very fuel efficient. So it'll be exciting to see how they implement this aircraft in the future.
On Monday, Oman Air finally joined the Oneworld Alliance. Woohoo! And this is something that was first launched in 2022, or not launched, but we've known Oman Air has been inbound for Oneworld for quite a while now. It's finally happened. And, like we've seen a lot of other alliance joinings or switchings that have taken a lot less time. SAS, I think, is one of the quickest ones. SAS switched over from Star Alliance to SkyTeam in pretty much record time, I would say. And Alaska Airlines, I believe it took a lot less time than Oman Air for them to join. But anyway, they finally joined. And what better place to celebrate than Amsterdam? This was almost, like you said, the SAS order was a double win almost. Well, this was a triple win because, there's only two Oneworld branded lounges in the world. There's one in South Korea and there's one in Amsterdam. So already, both of those make a good space for a Oneworld celebration. Now, add on to this that the day after Oman Air joined Oneworld, they had their inaugural flight to Amsterdam. So, it was a double celebration. Or triple celebration, I don't know. We were in the Oneworld lounge to celebrate. I didn't know, were we celebrating Oman Air joining Oneworld? Were we celebrating the inaugural launch of the Amsterdam flight from Oman Air? I think at some point there was also some celebration of Swissport being chosen as the handler for Oman Air in Amsterdam. But yeah, so we got to the lounge bright and early, and the Amsterdam airport had done a wonderful job of planning everything because, when the Oneworld lounge opened, one of my comments was, it's great, but all you can see are SkyTeam planes outside. Amsterdam airport made sure that the gate that you could see from the Oneworld lounge was used for the Oman Air 787 arrival, and the plane taxied around, but it had a water cannon salute, which I found a bit interesting because I know there's a sort of, some airports these days are saying, oh, we don't do water cannon salutes because of environment and you're wasting water. Now, obviously, Amsterdam Airport is one of the airports that is taking environmental responsibility very seriously. So it surprised me that of all the airports, Amsterdam Airport did this. But hey, it made for a great picture. Pieper, who's the CEO of Oneworld, he's from Alaska Airlines, was there. The CEO of Oman Air arrived on the Oman Air flight. He's a chap called Con, and there were also the Omani ambassador to Amsterdam. The CEO of Amsterdam Schiphol Airport was. It was a big event for. I didn't realize it was going to be the inaugural Amsterdam. I thought it was just going to be a sort of low key. Oman Air's in the alliance now, but it turned out to be a pretty big event. And this is more of a sort of teaser segment, because I sat down then with the CEO of Oman and Oneworld together, and we had a chat about lots of interesting things. And there's going to be lots of interesting and juicy stories coming to Simple Flying soon on that. So again, watch this space.
Oh, nice. Yeah. When you were talking about this, I remember scrolling on Instagram and seeing, I think it's a tradition that Oneworld does, but they kind of, when they welcome an airline in, they show different crew members from different Oneworld airlines.
Well,
yeah. So I was just trying to find that reel again, and I think that's kind of cool. So how they kind of, just welcome all the other airlines, welcome the new airline in. So
yeah, well, I mean, on that, you say, all of the other airlines welcome the airline in, but one airline specifically does a lot. And one thing I learned that I didn't know before was that, when a new airline joins an alliance, it will have a sponsor airline from inside the alliance. So in the case of Oman Air, this is Qatar Airways. And, Qatar has given Oman a huge amount of knowledge, not just on the technical side of things, but also, how things are working in the alliance, helping introduce them to the other alliance members. Qatar Airways staff have gone over to Oman and sort of been embedded there. Oman Airways staff have gone over to Qatar. So it is really, it's to make the system or the transition a bit less daunting. Because if you think, say you're American Airlines, there's just one new airline joining your alliance. But if you're Oman Airlines, you've suddenly got to meet 14 other airlines and integrate with them. So yeah, that's one of the things that we will talk about in more depth in articles coming to Simple Flying soon.
Yeah. Yeah, when I covered Starlux, their inaugural flight to Ontario, California, there was an Alaska Airlines executive there. And, some people might think, well, why would he be there? Because this is about Starlux. But, they're both One World partners. So, like you said, it kind of makes it a little bit less daunting. And I think it's also, publicity for travelers too, to be able to see, oh, wait, yeah, these airlines, have a partnership with each other. And, it just makes the route network a lot easier. It expands things. So yeah, that's some great news there. One other One World Alliance airline is Qantas and also Hawaiian Airlines. And that's my segue. I'm correct, right? Qantas is a One World Alliance
Qantas is
carrier.
Hawaiian, isn't?
Hawaiian, are they not?
No, I think perhaps what you're thinking is like they're merging with Alaska, but I think Hawaiian is not a one world carrier. I'm going to get the list up now and we can do a quick run through, but you can carry on until.
Okay, yeah. I thought for sure because they were merging.
Yeah, I'm sure they're going to come in. So I'm just going to go through them A to Z. We've got Alaska Airlines, American Airlines, British Airways, Cathay Pacific, Fiji Airways, Finnair, Iberia, Japan Airlines, Malaysia Airlines, Oman, Qantas, as you said, Qatar, Royal Emirates, Royal Jordanian, and Sri Lankan Airlines. And then, of course, tentatively, I don't know how it fits into the bigger picture, but S7 in Russia was a member that was suspended when all of that kicked off. And my understanding is that they're still technically a suspended member, but whether they'll ever be back in is anybody's guess. I mean, the future of Russian aviation is anybody's guess at this point, but that's a big detour.
I'm seeing here Hawaiian Airlines will join the alliance officially next year. So yes, currently they are a free agent, but obviously due to being acquired by Alaska Airlines, they will join the One World Alliance. And yes, that is my segue here because Hawaiian Airlines is one carrier that has been subject to cyber attacks recently. And I'm not sure if you've heard of this, Tom, but yes, not literal spider webs, but we're talking about scattered spiders. And so some may ask, what is that? Well, they are a cyber criminal group that has now shifted their attention to the aviation industry. So they have targeted big companies and IT contractors, but now we're seeing airlines that have been affected by this cyber criminal group successfully breaching the computer networks of multiple airlines across North America. And this report comes from CNN originally, and they are known as scattered spiders, who are known for their aggressive efforts to extort or embarrass their victims. Now, the FBI said last week that this group, which essentially means they target big companies or anyone in the airline ecosystem, including trusted vendors and contractors. They're also saying that once they are inside a company's network, these scattered spider actors steal sensitive data for extortion and often deploy ransomware. Now, the FBI is currently working with aviation and industry partners to address the activity and assist victims. But one of those victims, Hawaiian Airlines, and also WestJet, which is based in Canada, they confirmed last week that they were still assessing the fallout from their recent cyber attacks. Though the airlines did not necessarily name the perpetrators, but we're seeing with this investigation that we know that this criminal group has shifted their focus to the aviation industry. More victims in the aviation industry could come forward. That's according to sources briefed on the investigation. Now, WestJet's issues began last month when the airline said it was responding to a cybersecurity incident that was affecting access to, quote, some services and software systems, including its app for customers. Both WestJet and Hawaiian Airlines said their operations were unaffected by the attacks. Now, the lack of impact on operations at the airlines is likely a good sign of internal network separations or good business continuity and resiliency planning. And that comes from Akin Patel, the former Chief Information Security Officer at Harry Reid International Airport. Now, we talked about Qantas and how other airlines or other victims, if you will, might be coming forward. That's according to that CNN report. Well, Qantas recently just announced and confirmed that a cyber incident occurred in one of its contact centers, impacting customer data. Now, the system is now contained, but the airline says it understands that the news is concerning for its passengers. They're currently contacting customers to make them aware of the incident and apologize, and provide details on the supports that might be available. Now, this happened on Monday. The airline detected unusual activity from a third-party platform used by a Qantas airline contact center. They then took immediate steps and contained the system and can confirm that all of their systems remain secure. However, there are about 6 million customers that have service records in the platform. The airline said they're continuing to investigate the proportion of the data that has been stolen, though they expect it will be significant. An initial review has confirmed that the data includes some customers' names, email addresses, phone numbers, birth dates, and frequent flyer numbers. Importantly, though, credit card details, personal financial information, and passport details are not held in the system, and no frequent flyer accounts were compromised, nor have passwords, PIN numbers, or login details have been accessed. Now, they are conducting the investigation. They're putting additional security measures in place to further restrict access and strengthen system monitoring and detection. Qantas has notified the Australian Cybersecurity Centre and the Office of Australian Information Commissioner. Given the nature of the incident, they have also informed the Australian Federal Police as well. But Qantas CEO Vanessa Hudson said, "We sincerely apologize to our customers, and we recognize the uncertainty that this will cause. Our customers trust us with their personal information, and we take that responsibility seriously." So yeah, a little bit of a scary headline here, but we're glad that they've got it under control, at least.
Yeah, definitely. It's always good to get things under control, you know. Have I got a good segue? My only segue here could be Qantas doesn't fly to Amsterdam, but a lot of Oneworld airlines do. I believe that Amsterdam is the only airport that has 2 Alliance branded lounges. And obviously, you know, like you've got a lot of like, you know, you could say, oh, Heathrow has Oneworld lounges and Star Alliance lounges. Yes, it does. But the Oneworld lounges are specifically airline operated lounges like the British Airways lounge, the Cathay Pacific one, whereas the Star Alliance ones are the Lufthansa lounge, the Air Canada one, the United one, etc. What I'm talking about is really a lounge that is operated by the Alliance and is branded as the Alliance lounge rather than Alliance member that welcomes other members. So I believe Amsterdam is the only one of those. And I wanted to just quickly compare the Oneworld Lounge and the Star Alliance Lounge, because I was fortunate enough to go in the Star Alliance Lounge before I flew out back to Frankfurt this morning. So I'll start by talking about layout, seating, and workspaces. And I think here I would say my winner is Star Alliance. Now, the reason is they're 2 very different feels. The Star Alliance Lounge has more of like a slate, dark gray finish, whereas the Oneworld Lounge has the travel bright features. It's very bright, very white. There's lots of funky colors, funky stuff happening on the wall. But it's essentially like a very long corridor type lounge, which is, you know, and there's very, like, there's lots of different seating options, but they're sort of very outside the box seating options, like sofas and like a single little cubby hole here and all sorts. So, you know, I think just in terms of layout, seating, and workspaces, Star Alliance clinches it for me, just because it felt a bit more like, you know, your typical airline lounge rather than squeezing something into a space. But what would I say about food and beverage options? Here, I would give Oneworld Lounge the win. And the reason being is that when I had breakfast in the Star Alliance Lounge today, the only hot thing was a mushroom soup, which seemed a bit odd, 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. or so. But when I was in the Oneworld Lounge last night, they had different cuisines from all over the member airlines, and it rotates throughout the day depending on who's flying when. So, you know, they had, you know, you would have like a load of meats, you had chicken, meatballs, and some other meat, and then there's loads of different sides. Like I think I had rosemary potatoes. You can take your rosemary potatoes, and they've even got a whole different salad selection. And, you know I'm not comparing apples and apples because it's breakfast and dinner service, but I found just the options were much better in the Oneworld Lounge. But the Oneworld Lounge also has the benefit of having a staffed bar that does alcoholic drinks and barista coffee drinks, whereas you only have coffee machines and self-serve in the Star Alliance Lounge. Of course, in terms of additional amenities, I would give it a draw, because if you're calling the bar an amenity, then obviously Oneworld wins. But in terms of additional amenities, they don't really have that many additional amenities. Like, I don't think either of them has showers, for example. Neither of them have like day rooms where you could have a nap. They're just very much standard lounges. So let's give that a draw. But then service and atmosphere, that's a tricky one to call, because I think they really are two separate ones. In the Oneworld Lounge yesterday, I was incredibly hot, but again, this was an unprecedented weather event in Europe. It's not usually this hot, and it's kind of like how it snows one day in Heathrow and it causes chaos because Heathrow has to deal with that for one day. It doesn't make sense for them to have the same level of readiness as somewhere like Stockholm, where they'll have a whole season where it's snowing. It's a similar thing with the heat in Amsterdam. It's really a one-day event, so I can't complain about that. Although I would say in the Star Alliance Lounge today, I was shivering because the AC in there was on full. So I can't really compare those, but obviously in terms of service, you do have the bar in the Oneworld Lounge, whereas Star Alliance is self-service only. I guess if I had to do an overall winner, I think I would pick Star Alliance, just because I'm a little bit more. I think Star Alliance. I think it's biased. I think because I live in a Star Alliance hub, I'm conditioned to say Star Alliance. But both of the lounges have their pros and cons, and whatever airline you're flying on, both lounges will be wonderful for you. The big differentiation is, like, number one, going to be what airline are you flying, but also the fact that the Star Alliance Lounge is in the Schengen area, which is within the European passport area, whereas the Oneworld Lounge is not. So I had to go through passport control to get outside of Europe yesterday for the Oneworld Lounge. If you're transiting outside Schengen, you would have to go through passport control to visit the Star Alliance Lounge. So that's a little quick rundown of lounge comparisons.
Yeah, there you go. There you have it. I love that. I mean, any opportunity I have to explore a lounge, I will take it. So hopefully one day be able to explore those as well. But that is going to do it for today's podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and we welcome any feedback you might have at editorial@simpleflying.com.
For more great content, you can visit our website at simpleflying.com or find us on social media. Simply search for Simple Flying.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a rating on your favorite podcast player. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
In addition to our daily YouTube videos, Simple Flying publishes over 150 articles and a podcast every week. Visit simpleflying.com.